Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with Dev Express controls and libraries. Deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and I'm here with Courteney Ervin. She works at the New York Public Library. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
So we're in person in Portland, Oregon. You're in my fine city. Why are you here?
Oh, I'm here for Write Speak Code, which is a conference for women and non-binary developers to practice their career skills in writing, speaking, coding. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, very cool. So that is going to happen tomorrow, and you're here kind of setting up. Mm-hmm. So I was able to catch you while you're doing this. You work at the New York Public Library, and I met you first at Codeland. Mm-hmm. So that's now two different conferences that I've seen you at. Have you always been a conference goer?
Yeah. I actually have been a conference goer for longer than I've been a developer, or longer than I've been coding regularly. So it's sort of the only way that I know.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, like, I would say that for every one, conference goer, there's probably 1,000 that don't go. Mm-hmm. Why you said it was the only way that you know? Yeah.
I mean, when I started learning how to code, I was going to events like, Hack and Jill, now defunct, and Girl Develop It, and, got caught up in Write Speak Code as well. But those events helped me become a developer. And so, now they're just kind of a part of my developer DNA, where I feel like it's really important to create spaces that encourage people from a diverse background to continue their work in software.
Mm-hmm. So you are a developer. You've been a developer for a number of years. You came out of school, though, not with a development degree.
No, my degree was in English and anthropology. So basically computer science, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I get, the reason I ask is that I get a lot of emails from people who, and this is a lot, that say, I have a BA in English. Should I go back to school? I want to be a developer. And, I have said in my emails and my answers that, that I appreciate the rigor that four-year degrees give you, but honestly, that rigor can be applied to yourself in your self-study. Do you think you need to go back to school?
I think it depends on the person, but I don't think that it's required. And one thing that I tell people who go to school, is to make sure that they are learning how to code, working on open source projects, working on coding outside of school as well, and building up the skills that they need to prove to employers that they're valuable beyond the CS degree itself. Mm-hmm. And that just comes from my not lived experience, but the experience that I've heard people explain about computer science degree havers, which is coming out of school without the product building experience mm-hmm. that might be required in a full-time position. So I kind of bring that to the table when I give people advice who are in CS degree programs.
Mm-hmm. Were you a techie before? Were you like a 12-year-old techie? Everyone says, and then my mom and dad gave me a computer, mm-hmm. and then those people have like 15-year head start.
Yeah, no, I definitely wasn't that. I played a little bit of Berenstain Bears as a kid on my computer, but nothing that deep. I do remember when I was in high school, though, I would build these GeoCities websites with, definitely not licensed anime images. And I would make these, I would stay up until 4 a.m. making these like animated live journal icons for friends for their birthdays. Mm-hmm. But I didn't think that those things were the same as this job. I didn't know that there was a job that, staying up until 4 a.m. fixing the malware on your Windows computer could lead you towards doing.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So it sounds like you were a techie, but maybe didn't realize it.
Yeah, I didn't know that I thought it was just a thing that you do. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. I'm still learning that there are a lot of people who don't have the skills that I even had back then and was using on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. So you came out with what degree?
English and anthropology.
And did you assume that you would immediately become, I don't know, an English-speaking anthropologist or whatever people with those degrees do?
Yeah, no. I think I came out of school and was basically, I want to change the world, and there's only one way to do that. And so I started working at nonprofits, not as a developer at all, but instead as a program manager type, working directly with our clients. And I've worked at a few different nonprofits that are different. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then how long have you been at the public library?
2 years now, almost 2 years.
Did you go there to work on a particular product? Or did the product exist before you got there?
The product had existed, but only one person had been working on it, and they were building out a team. And so, I was really excited by the product itself, which is, Simply E, or Library Simplified, which is the name of kind of the suite of products and the partnership that helped bring them into being. And I was excited by them, having been someone who worked in the nonprofit sector and coming in, to technology. I wanted to make technology for nonprofits because I think that they are really, really bad at technology.
So the idea of building out a technology team inside of the library that's going to be working on some software that empowers the library and its patrons. Yeah,
because more often than not, nonprofits just buy vendor software for exorbitant amounts of money that maybe does, maybe doesn't meet their actual need. It's not very customizable, and they have to pay for everything that they add, every extension, every change. It's really, and sometimes it's a racket. Sometimes it's just a desire for grant-based money from the government coming through these nonprofits and going directly to third-party vendors. And I really liked the idea of working in a place where we were focusing on building software by the nonprofit for the nonprofit to solve a problem, not just for the New York Public Library, but for lots of public libraries everywhere. Now,
this might be a dumb question. Actually, I'm probably positive it'll be a dumb question. The New York Public Library, is it a system, or is it like one giant magical castle library thing?
A little bit of both. It's actually it's one of the top 4 libraries in a lot of different categories. So it's actually the largest, one of the largest public library systems. It's one of the largest research libraries. And it's unique in that it's both a circulating library for the people of New York City and New York State, but it's also a research library as well, and it has 4 different research divisions.
But is there only one on the island of Manhattan, or can I go to the Bronx and go to the New York Public Library?
Yeah, of course, there are a bunch of different individual library buildings, but they're all part of the same circulating system. And then the Queens and Brooklyn have their own.
And then this software, Simply E, is something that's used by all of those buildings.
Yes. So Simply E covers all of New York Public Library, and also Brooklyn Public Library uses the Simply E platform now as well. And we're going to be expanding to more states and more library systems soon.
And so what does it do?
So it's an e-reading application, and it's a mobile app that you can use to read books from the New York Public Library. But basically, it brings the number of steps to take out a book from the library that was an ebook was 19, and we brought it down to 3. And so making it a lot easier for people and patrons to access the books in a direct way that didn't involve any knowledge of sort of the DRM mechanisms behind reading the book.
That's interesting. This is really a total coincidence. Literally, before I met you here today, I bought a Kindle from a guy on Craigslist. It's in my bag here. I bought it for my son. And the guy made the comment, hey, you can plug that into the library system. And I know that because I tried and failed once because it was all kinds of weird steps in order to install some weirdo. It wasn't a nonprofit. It was some third party that we dare not speak its name. And,
I won't say it.
And it was just such a hassle that I would not want to inflict that on my son.
Right.
So I'm probably going to go find, EPUB books or figure out some other way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I interviewed for this position, I mentioned my own experience with unnamed third-party ebook application, and was like, I couldn't figure out how to read books. And if a person who, fixes my own Windows computer, can't figure out how to download books, how are we going to serve the entirety of New York City?
Mm-hmm. Now, does this application only work on Android and iPad and Windows machines, or what is the demographic? Can I put on a Kindle?
So we have been working with Kindle Fire, and basically that's just an Android application that is slightly different. And we had some trouble with it, but we have it on Chromebook, we have it on iOS, we have it on Android, and we're working on a web platform as well.
So then the idea is that I assume I log in, I have my official login for my New York Public Library that I'm a member of, and I say check out, and the book magically appears somewhere, and then when the book is time to be returned, I'm either offered a chance to renew it and it magically disappears?
It magically disappears, and it's all in the app, so you can read it in the app as well, and you can return it in the app, and we also have a huge open access library available, almost 5,000 books, a little more than 4,000 that you can browse and read for free and keep forever on your phone.
Oh, wow. Okay, like an unlimited lease.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So which part do you work on?
I basically work on all of it. It's a really flexible system.
Wow.
Our architect did a really great job of building something that was flexible because it has to work for a lot of different libraries. And like I mentioned, New York Public Library is unique in its arrangement of circulating and research, but we're hoping to reach university libraries as well. And then we also have to account for consortial libraries where, it's 8 different systems, but they all share the same collection. So it works for pretty much anyone.
So is this intending to be, for lack of a better word, a product where like Portland Public Library could my guy could call your guy and hey, I hear you got a cool app. Can we use it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely you can use it. And we're working with, some folks around infrastructure and making sure that libraries know who they can get in contact with if they need support for infrastructure. If you wanted to hire a developer to add a feature that doesn't exist, you could do that as well. It's open source. And so, any library can start working on it. And we're already working with several other organizations and, building our roadmap with many other institutions.
Wow, that's cool. Is it on GitHub?
It is.
Wow. So that seems like pretty forward thinking and progressive of a library to have an open source product like that.
Yeah, it was one of the reasons I joined the team. I love that it's open source. I love that, even if, for me, it's about longevity, right? So having an open source project, unlike a third party vendor who can stop supporting some product and then you're kind of stuck working with that product or trying to figure out a way to continue using it. With an open source product, if NYPL decided tomorrow that they didn't want to support Simply E or Library Simplified anymore, which they're not planning to do,
sure.
Then another library could just pick up the ball and get a grant for some developers and work on the parts that are important to them and to their population.
Now, you had mentioned that we don't want people to have to think about DRM. Is there DRM in this? I assume there would have to be, otherwise the publishers wouldn't allow you to distribute the books. Yeah,
there's definitely DRM in this, and it's a huge part of the constraints of the application. It's part of why you have to use a mobile app to be able to access the books and to read them as well, because the mobile app handles the DRM component.
Does that mean that by reading the source code, though, I might be able to break the DRM, or is it more thoughtful than that?
Oh, no. The DRM, the elements that handle the DRM are not in the source code itself, and we do a really good job of making sure that we're not breaking any of the licenses that we pay for.
That's cool. So you've got an app that runs in multiple places. You described everything from Chromebooks to browsers that you're working on, Android and iPhone. Is it a web-based app, and that's how it runs inside of iPhone and Android?
It's a web-based API, and then the mobile applications directly interact with the API. So we use a protocol called OPDS, Open Publication. Don't
something that
quote me on this.
Starts with S.
We just love shortening words to to things we can't remember.
That's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, that you didn't have to make up your own API, that people have already thought about that. So people in the librarian space have thought about APIs, so then you just use one as opposed to just making up your own REST API. Right?
Definitely.
Which is pretty cool. And then you say you have native applications that sit on top of that?
Yes, exactly. And so even our web-based client that we build, which is we have an admin component and we're working on a patron component, both of those directly interact with that same API.
Very cool. When I think about technology in a arguably non-technology based company, I could imagine that the architect or yourself could, for lack of a better word, kind of lord your power over the non-technical. How do you deal with those kind of interactions with, like, I don't know, the head librarian? I'm imagining the lady from Ghostbusters. At the beginning,
that's her.
right?
Yes.
So she's the head librarian, and she has to effectively trust you, both implicitly and explicitly, to do the right thing for the library, because you are the bridge between the tech and the non-tech.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've found working in kind of technology focused organizations is that it's just a very different level of communication that has to happen across the board. And this is sort of where the English and anthropology degree does come in handy. That when you work at, say, a Microsoft or a Google, there's an understanding that the software is the important part. And so developers have a sort of higher status than many other types of employees do at the company. When you work at the library, the focus is not on development. And so there's a huge amount of communication, negotiation, and education that has to happen on the part of developers to make sure that non-technical people understand what the work is that we're doing and why, and what the long-term vision is of that work. So it's actually the opposite. It's less lording it over and a lot more negotiating and conversing around and maneuvering through bureaucracy related to a very different way of doing work.
That's very interesting. I think of a company that I used to work with that did, it was a private business that did document management software, and the head of the thing was non-technical, but he knew what his vision was, and the techie was a genius, but she and he had trouble with the idea of, are we making tech because it's cool, or are we making tech for the people? But because it was for profit, there was a lack of empathy.
Yeah.
So this was a constant tension between kind of like using a Microsoft metaphor, the Steve Ballmer and the Bill Gates. What I'm hearing you say is that in a nonprofit, and particularly one that is trying to serve the maximum number of people in a very diverse populace, that you as a developer are having to amp up the empathy, and the entire team has to amp up the empathy.
Definitely. And we really do have to keep our patrons and our users in the center of what we're doing. It's not even necessarily about numbers. It's about making sure that we're providing a service that meets the mission of the library, and making sure that the people who work at the library understand that that's what we're doing and understand how those things come together. That's
interesting, though. You just said that the mission isn't about the numbers, but like my developer brain was like, what are the KPIs, right? What are the performance? Do we have 100,000, 1 million? Like, what's success?
Yeah. I mean, we certainly have goals, and we have metrics for ourselves and for where we want the project to be. But those metrics are also looking closely at what our users need, and expanding that user base by incorporating more libraries, and making sure that they are using the same accessible tools that we are able to use at the library. It's not about, I think in nonprofits, a lot of times there's a sense of wanting prestige and to put your name on everything. And this product is not about that at all. It's about getting good software to as many people as possible.
If you don't mind, maybe we can dig into a little bit of the tech.
Yeah, totally.
So what are each things written in?
So our backend is written primarily in Python. And then we have the native iOS application, which is in Objective-C, and Swift. We're switching over to Swift. And we have the Android application, which is using standard Android Java.
Are these things written kind of in the classical way because they need to support like the simplest possible phones? Like, do you have to go and say, we want to support the lowest Android and the oldest iPhone?
Yeah, we don't go from the lowest, but we definitely, we probably, especially on Android, I think we're doing KitKat 4.1.
Is that old? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot.
I don't remember all the candies.
Yeah, I don't remember them all, but I think it would be a lot easier if we skipped that one. But because we have this very diverse populace, and, not necessarily technical people who use their phones and keep them updated all the time, we have to make sure that we're covering as much as we can. So we do work backwards with tougher technologies.
And for the technologists that are listening who may be, I don't know, initially confused or have a thought about that word diverse, when we say diverse, that means age, economics, their bandwidth, literally everything.
Yeah, we mean everything. And I mean, just think about the population of a city, and every one of those people has access to the library. So you want to make sure that you are reaching as many of those people as possible. And we try to do that across a lot of different levels, but one of them is just making sure that the technology that they have in their pocket is going to be able to access the books that they want to read.
Right. So, I mean, a homeless person might have an Android phone,
Yep.
and they have the right to have a book on their phone.
Yeah.
You can enable them as well.
Definitely.
Okay. So the backend's written in Python, and I understand that you're using Docker as well, which again seems kind of progressive for I just assume libraries would like FTP.
Listen, we're a little bit on the cutting edge.
You guys are it's pretty fancy.
Yeah, we basically decided that, a lot of libraries don't have development teams. A lot of libraries don't have software engineers at all. And we would contact these libraries and say, hey, you should use Simply E. And the question is, well, how do I get it up and running, right? I want a test version. I want it up and running. And we realized that release management was going to be a really big part of making sure that other libraries were going to be able to keep up with what we were doing. So Docker became a solution for packaging up the application and moving our instructions from saying, hey, so first you need to run apt get install these 20 things. And instead we can say, okay, install Docker, then run these 4 commands and you have a running application. And that's how we manage our releases and make sure that only stable releases are going out to other libraries.
Is that forgive my ignorance about how Docker works, because I know about as much as it takes to be dangerous. Do you just update what's in the hub, and do they then update their Docker files in order to get the fresh base? Yeah,
that's how it works. And we're in the process of moving into a more continuous integration, continuous deployment type of arrangement, at least for what's on development, and then keeping up with our branches as we determine them to be stable.
So if someone had from whatever nypdl / colon latest in their Docker file, and you start moving towards this more continuous integration, how do people have to write their apps to be version aware, in the sense that the app knows that the Docker container has been shut down, brought back up? Whoa, I'm on 4.3 now. I guess I need to update my database. I need to do some, internal housekeeping.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work because we don't use something like Rails with a lot of database migration built in. I've done a lot of work to make sure that we can deploy the databases via scripts, keep them migrated, and making sure that past versions and future versions match each other. And so it's basically now just running the Docker container with an environment variable that's migrate or ignore or initialize, and that will set up your database as well.
What is the database?
The database is Postgres.
Okay. Wow. So that can scale forever, basically.
Yeah.
Is that running in a separate container and you have a Docker Compose?
It's RDS is what we recommend. Sometimes when I run tests, I do a Postgres in a different
What does RDS mean?
It's the AWS relational database service.
Oh, in the cloud.
Yeah, in the cloud. So we keep the database separate from the Docker contains because
that was my question.
Yeah, because it's not the best use of a container.
Well, yeah, I was wondering. It's very interesting that you're doing that, though, because there's been so much talk over the last several years about when the cloud is going to really cause everyone to move to the cloud. And it seems like databases in the cloud make the most sense. Everything in the cloud makes sense to some, but of all the things that we don't want to think about, database backups.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely something that I don't necessarily want to teach a bunch of libraries, sysops people to deal with.
So the libraries that you're using in the course of your application, do you have to check with the boss, or is there a compliance department? How do you not accidentally bring in, I don't know, are you GPL? Are you MIT?
We are Apache, and we did a round of making sure that all of the libraries that we're using, all of the technical libraries that we're using, this gets confusing.
Yeah.
All of the code libraries that we're using are in a version that we can distribute, but we do keep track of those licenses just because we have to be very risk aware about our legal compliance issues. Yeah.
The apps themselves, though, do I have to ask permission? If I'm a small library, someone's listening and they're like, oh, I'm in Topeka. We need to turn them on. can they just like clone and fork and start building these apps themselves, or should they check in with you first?
They should probably check in with us first, mainly because we are going to have, we're in the process of finishing up our library registry. Right now, the app is multi-library, so it's one application, and every library that's in the system will be in that application. So you here in Portland will open your phone, and it will check where you are location-wise, and then find the libraries closest to you. And if it's Portland Library or if it's the Oregon State ebook library or whatever it is, you would be able to immediately pull them onto your phone. But otherwise, you would have to build your own application. You have to register with Adobe for the DRM. There's a whole other element to it that you would have to take on yourself. So we basically recommend that libraries just hop on with everyone else and keep all the work on us in terms of getting people set up.
Which is interesting because not many libraries have enough money, I would assume, for a developer on staff, much less a whole team of developers on staff.
Exactly. And so when you join the Library Simplified community, a lot of what we talk to folks about is thinking about what their contributions might look like, whether they are developer contributions, whether it's, getting a grant and figuring that out, or whether it is the simple contribution of finding a way to host servers for the year and make sure that Simply E is on them.
Mm-hmm. I like that they don't have to think about the mobile apps. Just keeping them updated, putting them in the store, making it multi-tenant is really smart.
Certainly. And we have organizations who've reached out who want to create their own unique mobile application, and that's fine. And they're welcome to use our open source projects to get started with that. It's just not something that we have enough developer manpower to maintain.
Indeed. It's all about lowering the barrier.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that you're doing is you do a lot of testing for accessibility, because again, when we talk about a diverse populace, it could be people that are blind, that are low vision, that are low bandwidth. What does it mean to test for accessibility, and what kinds of things are you doing?
We have a great user research team that goes out every 2 weeks on Wednesday with application, with different tests basically set up for either the mobile application, the web client, and a lot of the other NYPL products that we use. And they sometimes, because we're a library, we have all of these different locations that serve different populaces. So we can go to the high school public library branch that's, very close to young people and see how they're interacting with it. We can use the library for the blind and talk to low sighted and low vision people and make sure that they know how to use the application and that it's working well with the software that they're used to, and seeing lots of different ways that people who use technology differently than sighted people are able to use the application. And then we also work with just people that walk into the library off the street and see how they work with the application as it currently exists and different elements that we add and features that we add.
So I'm hearing formal and ongoing and basically continuous UX testing.
Yes.
You do have a large blind populace in New York. New York's actually very nice to get around.
Yeah.
I did some work with the Federated Blind of New York back in the day.
Wow.
They have a UX department where you can bring your application there and pay them, and then they will blind engineers and testers will go in.
I didn't know that. That's great.
You do more. You said you work on all aspects of it. Are you more of a web person, or are you more of a mobile app?
Oh, I work on the API, so I'm largely on the back end, and then sometimes I help with testing for the mobile application. But all of the things that I do on the back end impact what's possible in the front end. So when I say I work on all of it, I work on both the elements that directly interface with the mobile client and also the further back servers that handle open access books or handle metadata management and making sure that we know all that we can know, the best that we can know about each book that comes through.
How are you handling versioning your APIs? Because it's been a couple of years now.
So I guess we just launched the multi-tenant version of the code base, and it's not in production yet. So we are at 2.0.1 is our most recent version.
Do you version that based on headers or the URL? And now that you have multi-tenant, there's another whole dimension there, because you could have people on different versions.
Yeah, we could have people on different versions. I think it's something that we're figuring out as we go. But we try to keep things as backwards compatible as possible, because right now it's just NYPL and Brooklyn Public Library on the application. It's pretty easy to maintain.
On the new one.
on the most recent version who are hosting in production. But we have a bunch of libraries that are getting set up, and once they start using the app, we will see more of the need for releases and backwards compatibility.
Yeah, it sounds like you are going to learn very quickly.
Oh, yes.
So how can people who are listening who maybe hadn't thought that there were big nonprofits that they could potentially work with, or social good, in quotes, organizations that someone could potentially work with? Because I think a lot of people come out of school with their computer science degree and they go and they say, I'm going to jump into the public sector. You came out with a double degree in English and anthropology and then leapt into nonprofit. Do you all need help in nonprofit?
Oh, yeah. I think nonprofit organizations definitely need help and support and engineering support. I think that it's important to be thoughtful about the ways that engineers bring them help. And I feel like in my travels and in the conferences that I've done, I've met a lot of people who want to do social good coding, and that's really important. And but it's also important that we think about giving a library just some software and not the means of maintaining that software, keeping it up to date, making sure that they can make changes to it in the future is not necessarily as helpful as thinking about what the real problem is and solving the problem for more than just one organization. So I think it's something that you can figure out through conversations with stakeholders and figuring out the problem and really thinking about, okay, so what's the best way for me to help? Is it just to give money to this nonprofit that I know I want to support, or is it to create an application to solve their problem and help them become more efficient?
And then finally, I want to ask kind of the most difficult question, because I'm sure that there is someone who's listening and saying, yeah, but you probably can't make any money if you're a nonprofit developer. Is this one of those situations where you have to take a significant pay cut because you want to do good, and you're always in your mind going, yeah, but Facebook could throw money at me?
I don't think it has to be that significant of a pay cut. I think that you need to be realistic about what you want out of a career. I will say that at the library, I work my hours, but if a service goes down at night, it's not the end of the world. Unlike Facebook. If something goes down at night at Facebook, you have to be there.
See, it's so funny that you say that, because somehow it seems to me like the library is more important than Facebook.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It is to me.
I mean, in my experience, yes. Yeah. But I think that, I get to go to work and work on something that I feel really excited about. And I make, enough money to live my life and be satisfied and feel emotionally satisfied with the work that I do. And then I get to go home at the end of the day, and that work doesn't necessarily have to come with me unless I'm trying to make something really extra happen that particular week. I get to put things down. So I like the hours that I'm able to work, and I like the fact that I'm able to commit those hours to the things that are important to me.
That's a great answer. I think also that I see a lot of people, particularly just a few years out of school, that are saying, well, I want to be a senior engineer, and I want to be a whatever comes after senior engineer. And like they think about their career and this, that up and to the right chart, which I think is a cliche.
Yeah.
Right? And at what point do you stop? Why not, have a gentle slope? And it sounds like you could be in this business for the next 20, 30 years and then be the head of the team, be the head of the library technology group. There's a lot of potential career growth. Yeah,
definitely. And you get to solve problems in a way that is not the same as solving problems for some profit margin. So it's really exciting to be able to think about problems in the sense of, well, how do we make this work given what we have and what we have is, we have a will and a mission and 6 engineers and a desire to make it happen for everyone in the United States if we can.
Very cool. Where can people check out the code and explore Simply E?
Yeah, so we're on GitHub. Our organization is NYPL-Simplified, and the main API code base is circulation, but there's plenty there. It's not necessarily set up for outside contributors, but I'm hoping to get it there soon, and you can kind of see what we're working on and where we're at.
Very cool. Thank you so much. And people can also check you out speaking at conferences all over the place.
Yes, definitely. I'm around.
Fantastic. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.